My name's Sean, I'm Vice President of ULU, and we're hosting this week debates and meetings with some of the mayoral candidates. Pleased to say Joni Jones, AM and GLA? AM is here, member of the London Assembly, and Green candidate to mayor. All my green suit specially, got it out a few days early for St Patrick's Day. So I'd like to let you say what you'd like, and then we're going to do some question and answers and points as well.
I'll stand up to it just to start. I'll say a little bit about myself, and then I'll say a little bit about the Green Party, and then I'll say something about what the Green Party is promising to do for students if we have a Green mayor. My name is Joni Jones. I've been an Assembly member for 12 years, and so I've been able to watch both mayors of London. So I've watched both mayors in action. I watched Ken Livingstone for 8 years, and I've watched Boris Johnson for 4 years. So I feel I know pretty well how the mayoral process operates. And with Ken Livingstone, I was able to work. So at various times, I was his deputy mayor of London. I chaired several bodies for him. One body called London Food, another called the Waterways Commission. And so, although I was an Assembly member, I was able to influence events. Now, Ken Livingstone boasted at one time that he never gave any Assembly members any money to actually spend, but he did give me money. He gave me £3 million to spend on a food strategy for London and its implementation, and he also gave me various pockets of money to spend on walking and cycling when I advised him on those two issues. Now, the Green Party, does everybody know about the Green Party? Do you know? It stands for two things, essentially. The first is environmental justice, which everybody usually knows about, and the second thing is social justice. And that for us is an incredibly important, it's two planks. You can't have environmental justice without social justice, because if people are too poor to feed their kids, pay their bills, they're not going to have the time to worry about the planet. And so Greens are very good at seeing the balance between these two things, and also always seeing the inevitable consequences. Because one of the things that I find so infuriating about the other political parties is that they never really think about what's going to happen downstream. So often you hear about things that are going to be the big answer, like biofuels or something, but then actually, of course, they're not the big answer, because there is never a big answer to something as complex a problem as the environmental challenges that we're facing in the world. Now, what would a Green mayoral candidate do for students? Well, the fact is that students in many ways have exactly the same problems that a lot of other Londoners have. You have a problem of very expensive public transport, you have a problem with housing, often very insecure rented housing. You also have the problem of jobs later, and that's true for virtually every Londoner. Almost everybody I speak to is insecure at the moment about their job. And finally, of course, what you have in particular is the whole issue of the EMA. Now, I understand that Ken Livingstone has actually made a promise that if he gets re-elected, he's actually going to reintroduce the EMA. He's going to all the boroughs. He says he's talked to them already, and he will actually start to reintroduce the EMA, which would be, I think, incredible progress. I haven't looked at the figures, I haven't looked at any of the working out of this, but it certainly sounds a good idea. Having said that, the Green Party is the only political party that has actually consistently fought against scrapping the EMA, because we believe that it is everybody's right to be educated, and to do that for free, because what happens later is you pay back to society whatever we give you for your education, and I personally had a completely free education, which I'm very grateful for. Whatever you get for free as an education, you later give back to society, whether it's in terms of your own work or just the taxes that you pay. And so, a Green mayor would hold all fares below any sort of cost of living increase for 3 years, and then we would reduce them, and we would make some substantial differences to the housing market. The mayor next year is going to get extra powers on housing. It means that the mayor could actually start to build houses, and affordable houses and social housing. And this, I think, is something that any mayor will have to do. And finally, what was the other thing you mentioned? Housing, travel, EMA. Anything else? Sorry? Thank you, yes. Oh, there's another issue. Anyway, I'm very happy for you to ask me any questions you like. And if you've got any questions that I can't answer, there's several very talented people in the audience who will answer them instead.
To what extent, if any, do you feel the financial district is a positive for London?
Sorry, I didn't mention jobs. That's the other thing I was going to come back to. One of the frustrations is seeing just how much energy goes into supporting the banking sector. And one of the ways that you can actually create jobs is by backing small and medium-sized businesses in London.
What about on things like cuts, where although the mayor doesn't have direct power over what the government's doing, having the mayor as a strong voice to protect the most vulnerable Londoners? London has some of the poorest boroughs in the country. What was your position to the national government, the national political scene?
I mean, that's an interesting question, because the Mayor of London actually has fairly limited powers. The biggest power is transport, so that's where the Mayor can make some very big changes. And otherwise, the Mayor basically just takes positions with the power of their personality, and I would love to stand with this government. I think it's doing some terrible things to society. I think that the cuts agenda has been done very, very badly. It's been done too fast and just gone too far.
I was just wondering, if you reduce fares on public transport, how do you sustain public transport for the future, or how do you finance it, or how do you improve it?
Well, in the first 3 years, that's why I talked about 3 years and a year. In the first 3 years, we would actually raise the congestion charge, because at the moment, too many people think the congestion charge is quite elastic. People are prepared to pay it. And it's at £10 at the moment. We would go up to £15. We'd also put in a much bigger charge for very polluting vehicles. It's part of our air pollution strategy.
Such as buses?
Sorry?
Such as buses?
We would make sure that buses get cleaner and taxis get cleaner. But a lot of the private traffic, the private cars are still very polluting. I mean, one of the big gripes I've got against Morris is that his beautiful new bus, which I've only been on the mock-up of so far, for that one bus, we could have had 93 clean buses in London. So in my view, he's misspent money, and I would spend it differently.
Got another one for you then.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've been on the policing, what's called Metropolitan Police Authority, which is now back at the mayor's control. So as mayor, clearly policing would be one of your major responsibilities.
Yes.
Certainly, ULU and lots of people in the student political movement have had a lot of dealings with the police of late. I've spoken to you about that before, in fact. What would be your view on the way protests is going, the way Metropolitan Police is increasingly heavy-handedly policing protests? What do you think this means for our civil liberties and our right to protest?
In my time on the police authority, I spoke again and again about civil liberties and how the police should police protest in terms of backing off, not wearing, the whole kit, or explaining to people what they were trying to do. And I thought they were getting better until the student protests. And then I think they got so much negative publicity for actually standing off and not engaging, that now they feel they've got to go in, and the riots made it worse, because they stood off at times during the riots and got loads of bad publicity, so now they feel they've got to go in hard.
I'm a cyclist,
Oh yeah.
and I cycle around London a lot, and you mentioned about reducing traffic, but also just wondering if you've got any policies that help improve safety for cyclists.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a cyclist myself, and I got knocked off twice in just under a year, so I feel very, very strongly about this. And there are all sorts of things you can do. Again, it's a complex problem, and you need lots and lots of different solutions. I mean, HGVs are talked about a lot, and they are a big problem on our roads, and it would be fantastic if we could ban the biggest. But until we can, just making sure that they have all the right mirrors, that the drivers are properly trained, and that cyclists have enough of the advanced stop lines at night so that they can get far enough forward and be seen by the other traffic.
Back to sort of another quite squarely student issue. Landlords and private landlords in the capital, particularly when you're in the university in a town like Loughborough or somewhere where there's a borough council you can talk to, it's much easier to get road landlords out. In London, students from SOAS or UCL could be anywhere in the whole city. What will you as mayor do for students and road landlords?
I think, first of all, the private rented sector, where I think virtually every student lives, is very dysfunctional. Well, the whole housing situation in London is dysfunctional at the moment, but particularly private rented housing, because there is so much demand. So if you as a tenant complain about a boiler or some mold walls, chances are you're going to get kicked out, because there's always somebody who's prepared to put up with it for the same or more rent. And what we have to do is make tenancies more secure. It happens in other countries. It actually suits landlords as much as it does the tenants. So it means that after 6 months, I think you have to have a certain amount of notice before they can get rid of you and so on. It makes you feel safer. And of course, the minute you've got a family, and some students do have families, then it gets even harder if you don't have secure tenancy. You can have the children and get to know the community. One of the things the Greens did on the Assembly was get the Mayor to introduce the London living wage. And this idea is that you have it's a slightly increased amount over the minimum wage because it costs more to live in London. It's still only £8.30. It depends, it's only livable on if you have benefits at the same time. So we have another policy which I think is brilliant, and that is a 10-to-1 policy, so that the lowest paid person of any company can move to the city, and we can definitely do it at the GLA. The lowest paid person is paid at least 10% of the top person. So we're not putting a cap on salaries. People can pay themselves as much as they like, as long as they pay their cleaners 10% of what they earn.